best source of nutrients for maximizing muscle growth and minimizing body fat. So that what I will say to that is it's not really a macronutrient per se, whether you're doing it by way of fat or doing it by way of carbs or whatever. If you're in a maintenance calories, it doesn't really matter where those calories come from, whether it's coming from fats, carbs, proteins, whatever. You're most likely not going to be storing any body fat at all if you're close to maintenance calories. Now, I will say if you're in a calorie surplus, the easiest thing to store as fat is fat. If you wanted to run rough numbers, of course, fat is so easy to be stored as fat because there's no conversion necessary. It just stores it as it is. Your body can store roughly 98 out of 100 calories into fat. That's the rough numbers. When you look at protein's the hardest thing to store as fat. So if I was going to err on the side of anything, I would err on the side of protein because roughly 72, numbers off the top of my head, 72 or 74 calories out of 100 can be stored as fat. So it's really hard to store proteins as fat, and carbs is somewhere near the 80 calorie range. I think it's 78 if I remember off the top of my head. How does comeback from a long layoff impact muscle gain in both deficit and surplus? Okay, that's actually a good question. So if you're having a long, and this is kind of cool to see actually. So this goes into like the whole muscle memory type of question, right? And the muscle memory question, so muscle memory is a real thing. I think it's kind of thought of in a wrong way, but it is a real thing. It's not like your muscles have a memory and they're like, oh, I remember where I needed to be before, and they come back. It's not really that type of thing. But what happens is as you start building muscle, your body gets better at building muscle. Okay, so you're born with a certain number of nuclei in a muscle, right? So think of like a nuclei as workers building bricks, or and your muscle is the bricks, right? So the more workers you have, the faster you're going to build the wall. When you first start building muscle, you only have let's say you have one worker, right? One nuclei there, right? This is really bad way of explaining it, but it kind of makes it easy. With that, when you're building muscle for longer periods of time, you start getting more workers. So now you have 3 workers on the job site, and those guys just never leave the job site. They're always on the job site. So even if you stop working out, you still have those 3 workers there versus the one you had when you very first started lifting weights. And when you say, hey, workers, get back to work, they're going to build the wall faster this time than they did the very first time because there's more of them around. There's more nuclei, right? So that's why it's going to come back a lot faster because your body is, and there is some muscle memory thing to it where your body has it kind of remembers where it needed to be to perform the way it needed to perform at one point before. I don't know the research on that part of it. Okay. How did I calculate the 62 calorie days surplus for building muscle? JT Surveyo. So one thing, it's not a surplus. It doesn't need to be a surplus. It just needs to be 62 calories per day going towards muscle. And the way I calculated that is how many calories are stored in 1 pound of muscle, which is roughly 800, divided by the amount of days that generally someone can build 1 pound of muscle. These are all really rough averages, which is 45 days. Now, remember, that's going to be completely different based on the person. If you look at, Phil Heath or, Big Ramy, they're going to probably be able to build more than 1 pound of muscle in 45 days versus someone like that's smaller, let's say an Ashley Cotwalser, right? Obviously, there's going to be a big difference on how much muscle they can build. These are all rough numbers, but these are based on the averages of what people think that you can build. So in studies, it was 10 grams of muscle per day can be synthesized was like the average agreed upon thing. And of course, that's still a rough number. I don't even know how they came up with that 10 grams of skeletal muscle can be basically synthesized from amino acids per day in a muscle cell. And then 45 days would be 1 pound for that. So I divided those numbers. And it doesn't need to be a surplus. It just needs to be calories shifted towards muscle to help with recovery and building those skeletal muscles. So that's where that came. And now again, and in that, I also did say maybe for some people it's 120 calories because they can build 2 pounds in 45 days. So it's going to be rough based on the person. But, again, when we're talking about precision of calories, it's almost impossible because even the information we have on nutrition labels isn't 100% accurate. There's allowed to be a variance in the United States. Not only that, but, you sitting on the couch one day versus you walking a lot one day is different. You working legs one day is a lot more calorie burning than you working arms one day. So there's going to be differences of intake. And if you're trying to be precise, 100%, and getting it down to the calorie, you're not going to be able to do that. So I would generally overshoot it a little bit too. And you just need to average that over the course of 45 days. It doesn't need to be just that day. If you're in a surplus and eating whole foods, does that help with gaining? If you're in a surplus with any foods, that should help with gaining as long as you're meeting your minimum demands of protein. for the day. Now, I will say if you're in a caloric surplus, you don't necessarily need as much protein as well. JC Cavero, 2,500 calories in pound of muscle, 30 days equals 83 calories. So it was run off of 800 calories are stored in muscle, not calories to build muscle. So you need more calories to actually energy to actually synthesize that protein, I think is what you're talking about, which is different. But as you can see, even if it was, let's say I was completely wrong there and it was 83 calories, which I'm going off of stored energy, not the energy demands needed to build muscle, which is, I guess you would say net calories is what I'm talking about. And you're talking about intake, almost like if you looked at net calorie intake versus, or so you would say thermic effect of food calories. If you look at food on a plate versus food after it's consumed and digested, different calories at the end of that, right? So there are two different ways of looking at that, I guess you would say. So both right. And as far as I think it's between 25 and 2,800 calories of energy needed to push those 800 calories to synthesize amino acids, if that's what we're talking about here. But that's like, again, even then we're talking about a little bit of calories. And the whole point of it is that you don't need as many calories as we think you do to build muscle. Everyone thinks you need 500 calorie surplus a day. And even in like the most extreme example, we're talking 83 calories. And that's not even in a surplus. That could be coming from fat in a deficit. So it doesn't need to be in a surplus. And that's the whole point of this video too. But I do like that your research. I think that's great. Is there a minimum amount of carbs we should be at in a maintenance or a small surplus? No. Remember, carbs are not essential. Okay, you have essential fats, essential amino acids, essential proteins, right? But you do not have any such thing as essential carbohydrates. You do not need carbohydrates. Your body can produce them on its own. There is no need for them in terms of requirement for survival. Now, is it optimized? Is your workouts going to be optimized if you don't have any carbohydrates at all? Unlikely. Some people can perform well off of them, and some people, feel like they need carbohydrates. And if it's hindering your workout, I think that that's the important thing. And I think that that's another question we need to go into one day too, is that, am I dieting so hard that I'm having negative feedback on my workouts, and therefore would me dieting with higher calories and able to get better workouts be better than me dieting at lower calories to lose body fat, right? That's another question, right? So there's like some really cool questions out there that would be a good one to dive into. The other question is that I like to go into one day which is a hard one to go into, is what's better, what's healthier to a natural competitor who needs to diet at extremely low calories and extremely high cardio to get in the shape and requirements of today, or an enhanced competitor who's taking drugs, which obviously are not the healthiest thing, but is able to do that with less cardio and more calories. Which one is healthy? They're both unhealthy. So which one's less healthy, right, is another argument. And people think just being natural is the healthiest way of doing things, right? But there's obviously arguments where if you were to take something and you can offset the differences there's an argument there too, which is a really cool argument that needs to dive into too. What is most important, to get in the exact amount of macros or the exact amount of calories that you need to in that day? Well, they're both kind of the same thing. If you got in the exact macros, then you would get in the exact calories. So you can't do one different of the other. If you're hitting your macros precisely, you're going to hit your calories precisely. There's calories are associated with the macros. So 4 calories in protein per gram, 4 calories in carbs per gram, 9 calories in fats per gram. So you can't kind of get away from that. But if you're to ask the question of, can I shift my carbs, fats, and proteins if I'm hitting my daily calories, then I would say in a caloric surplus, yes, you have a lot more availability of doing that, of getting in less proteins because you're in a caloric surplus. So your body's going to basically reserve all the proteins to be used for what it needs to be. If you're in a big caloric deficit, I would definitely get in my protein requirements because you're most likely, you're going to need more of it. You're going to have a higher need for it at that stage because you might be using some of those proteins as energy when it's consumed. So converting it and using it as energy because the calorie demands are so needed. So this is Cat Mama. She says, "Hey, Cat Mama will like my shirt. This is it's a cat. This says Gato con Botas, right? Which is Puss in Boots in Spanish, which is like the funniest thing. I thought it was a funny shirt. So, all right, let's see here. That's how they advertise it in Mexico. Isn't that funny? Yeah, it's Puss in Boots in Mexico. Isn't that the funniest thing? I thought it was hilarious. I had to do it. All right, now someone made a comment and I lost my question. Dang it! I'm trying to find you again. I'm gonna find you, Cat Mama. I'm just gonna go through the questions as they came in. Is it healthy to be on a deficit diet for more than 8 weeks? What do you recommend? Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess you would have to ask yourself the degree of deficit that you're in. We're designed to be in deficits and surpluses. We're designed to be in, feast and famine. That's why we have energy stores as fat. So it's not really unhealthy to be in a deficit. But again, you have to talk about the variance of how big of that deficit is. Is your deficit, 1,000 calories a day? Well, that's going to change things from being, it's going to start affecting hormones negatively relatively quick. So yeah, you don't want to be in a deficit that great for that long, so you can be in extreme deficits for like 2-week periods and have no negative effects. But you want to be in an extreme diet for 6 months or, 8 weeks, you're probably going to see some negative effect. If you're in a 100-calorie deficit, you probably be in a 100-calorie deficit for a very, very long time without having almost no effects. So the question is varied based on the extreme of the diet. What are the ideal carb sources for gaining muscle and minimal fat? Doesn't really matter the carb sources. If you're at maintenance calories and you're actually at maintenance calories, it doesn't matter what the carb sources that you're eating. It's not going to change anything. It's still a calories in, calories out thing. It's really not going to change anything at all. Oh, Cat Mama, here you are. All right, at maintenance calories, how much do you cut to get in a deficit? Okay, so if you're at maintenance calories, you have to ask yourself. So one, you have to figure out how you got to the calorie threshold of saying I'm at maintenance calories. Have you been testing your data? Have you been testing your weekly measurements and like doing all that info? If you've done it and you've gotten to be exactly maintaining your shape exactly, and you're at maintenance calories with doing your check-ins and all that, well then what you want to do is, you have to look at your goal, right? Look at what your real goal is. Let's say your goal is we have to come up with a scenario. So let's say you're 130 pounds, but you feel best at 120 pounds. So you have 10 pounds to lose and you have to go to a wedding in 10 weeks. Well, in that scenario, pretty simple, right? You want to go to a wedding, you want to look good on the beach, whatever. You want to lose 10 pounds and you're at maintenance calories. Well, then that would mean that you need to lose 1 pound per week and you would go to a 500 calorie deficit per day to reach that 1 pound marker. Then you want to continue to do your check-ins, your measurements every week. And if you're not hitting that marker, adjust accordingly based on your feedback from your own check-ins to make sure it's still staying on pace. But that would be how you do it. And so you have to associate it with the goal. If you're just trying to lean out, 500 calorie deficit is a decent place to start for most people. It's 1 pound a week is not too overly aggressive. I generally will try to shoot for 1% per week if someone's trying to be aggressive. So if you're 150 pounds, I shoot for 1.5 pounds. If you're trying to recomp and trying to build muscle and optimize muscle growth, but still lose some body fat, I would probably cut that deficit down to maybe like a couple hundred calories only. The only problem with that is that it gets really frustrating because you're not seeing much progress on the scale weekly. It's almost like really low progress because now you're in a very minor deficit, but you're trying to optimize both muscle gaining and losing body fat. So when does extra credit cardio become overtraining? It's unlikely you're going to overtrain with extra cardio, but it depends on your cardio that you're doing. If you're doing HIIT cardio and you're running, balls out on the treadmill, it's going to happen a lot faster than if you're just doing like walking on the treadmill, even walking at a slow pace on the stair mill. So that would be the dictating factor, and also your normal activity level is going to be a dictating factor, right? So I'll give you an example. Like me, for my cardio, I'm basically boxing like 4 times a week, and I'm doing like 30 to 1 hour sessions of that. So for me, that's a lot of like movement of my upper body, right? So if I went into, let's say I'm like, I want to lean out faster. I'd be doing, let's say, I would say I want to do stairs or I want to run on the treadmill on top of that. Well, that is going to be a lot to me, and it's going to fry my nervous system a lot faster than someone who was already doing sprints on the treadmill or already doing jogging on the treadmill. So it's situational. A lot of the times it's situational. So if someone's, sitting on the couch, hasn't worked out for, 5 years, and they would overtrain a lot faster than someone who's really experienced. So it's a hard question to answer because it's per person. But I'll say you're going to fry your nervous system before you fry your muscular system. So just pay attention to those things. How your energy is in the gym, your desire to be in the gym. Those are all kind of signs. Your recovery, if you're getting, injured more frequently, those are all signs that you could be getting to that point of your nervous system needing a little bit of a break. I try to keep cardio very, very low in the off season. If I'm trying to get someone ready for, like if I'm thinking just for physique sports, I'm not thinking of long-term health or anything like that. I try to almost minimize cardio to nothing if I can in the off season. That way their starting point going into a show can be as low as possible. So I can start with, that way when someone starts a prep, they can do, I'll give you an example. Like Ashley is doing 3 sessions of cardio this week because she hasn't done any cardio since the Arnold. But if she was doing 6 sessions of cardio since the Arnold per day, the only way to get her to create a stimulus through cardio would be to do more cardio than she was already doing, right? Because her body's already kind of adapted to that cardio point that she's at doing 6 days a week times whatever, 30 minutes. We'd have to start off doing 6 days a week times 40 minutes to create any stimulus, right? So I guess that's the answer to that. It's a long answer to that. Okay, where did you get your certificate education, NASM? I did go to NASM. I will say this, and I do have a degree too, but honestly, it almost none of it matters. If you want to be good at this, just do your research. Schooling doesn't teach you that much real world practice, unless you're like a lawyer or something, I don't know, or a CPA. But most schooling these days, it just teaches you about things like, why am I learning history if I want to be a personal trainer, right? In college, why does that matter? So this doesn't apply. A lot of the stuff you do in schooling and even in ASM and whatnot, it doesn't apply to what you're doing. And practical application applies more than anything. Some of the best coaches in the world have zero education in fitness and nutrition. They just kind of learn it as it is. I mean, honestly, if you are a dietitian and you went to be a contest prep coach and you use all the information, all the knowledge you used and you stuck to it as a dietitian and were a contest prep coach, you would get nowhere as a contest prep coach, because what you do as a contest prep coach goes against what you're supposed to be doing as a dietitian. The protein's too high, the calories are too low, the cardio is too much. You're not getting on all the nutrients through foods. Like, it's totally different. So honestly, it's practical application and going through this thousands and thousands of times. I would say I use the only thing I even think about, like with any schooling or any NASM stuff for contest prep, is like, okay, 4 calories. I learned 4 calories are in a gram of carbs, and 4 calories are in a gram of protein. And that's like all I learned from it. Everything else has been like, it's just based on experience. Of course, it gives you a good base, but doesn't do that much. And it's kind of unfortunate to say that. I wish that they had something specific for something as extreme as this, because I think people could benefit from learning about it, because that's what everyone wants. Everyone wants to get results fast, wants them now, right? They don't want to know, okay, am I getting my micronutrients from spinach today, and is it offsetting my iron or whatever? You know what I mean? It's like, in our world, no one cares about that stuff. I learned that as a personal trainer when I first started. I came out of like my NASM cert. I was like 18, and I was like, oh, I'm going to learn about corrective exercises and corrective stretching and teach everyone. And everyone was like, no, just tell me how to get this fat off my ass right now. I don't care about I don't care about my corrective stretches and my postural imbalances and all this stuff. And as soon as I was like, okay, this is what people want, that's all they care about learning, let's get fat off people's asses now. That's what they want. Give them what they want. So unfortunately, the market demands don't meet what they teach, for the most part, because they'll teach you about corrective exercise, corrective stretching, and all these different things. And you see these like top pros and whatnot, and yeah, it's going to help them a lot, but they want to know, how do I get shredded and win a show? That's what they want to know. So it's unfortunate. It's just like learning history. If you want to be an exercise science major in schooling, it's like, why? What do I need to know that for? I already learned it in high school. So anyway, okay. What is recovery time you've seen in your clients that have decided to get a breast augmentation? Generally, I will say fit people recover faster from what I've seen. 6 weeks to 8 weeks is like very, very normal time frame. Some people, longer periods. I would say also the larger you go at the first time, the worst. If you go really, really big and it's your first time having a breast augmentation, it's probably going to take you a little bit longer, probably looking at the 10-week period. If you already had implants and you're just like getting new implants and maybe going a little bit bigger, it seems to be a lot faster recovery too. I have been part of a lot of these things because my primary thing is I'm working with women, so I get a lot of questions. I've been to a lot of doctor appointments. We had one in plastic surgeon we went to all the time in Denver, and he taught me all about these things. So just want to lose general body fat. Okay, here's one thing I think all of you need to know too, is and you got to think about it, there's no difference between losing fat in prep and losing fat as general health and fitness. They're both just losing fat. And I used to teach classes at 24 Hour Fitness when people were kind of going through their class. They would go through, so back in the day at 24 Hour Fitness, we used to have to go through a 1 week class of learning personal training through this thing it was called Apex Certified Trainers. It was way back in the day. It was like 2000, like in the early 2000s. And I would go into kind of teaching these little things and talk about, extreme preps and extreme dieting versus regular dieting. And when I would talk to people about what's required for someone to be in a contest prep to lose, to get in shape, or it's someone who's, let's say a 200-pound female trying to get in shape, they would always give me these really extreme things for the contest preps people. They would say, oh, they need to do an hour of cardio a day fasted. They need to eat tilapia and asparagus. But then the 200-pound person who actually has a health issue because she's so overweight, they would give her like the most easy things. They'd be like, oh, let's just get her walking on the treadmill again. Let's just have her cut her regular Coke and go to like Diet Coke and increase her water and activity level. And then I would say, hey guys, why are we taking the most in shape, healthiest people who are about ready to get to a show and going through the most extreme practices to get them to lose just a little bit of body fat versus someone who's actually has health issues and we're giving them the easiest approach? Really, on paper, those two should be inverted, right? But we don't think about it the same thing. Fat is fat. It doesn't matter if you're contest prep. It doesn't matter if you're 600 pounds and need to lose weight. Fat is fat, and the approach needs to be really the same and thought of as the same. Now, obviously, it's going to take more extremes once you get to those very, very low levels of body fat. Like if you're trying to go from, let's say you're a bikini competitor, and you're trying to go from, let's say, 17% down to a stage lean of 13% or something like that. The last 2% might take some extremes, but getting to that stage before that is really the same thing. It doesn't really matter. So, slight deficit, nothing crazy. Fat is fat, don't make it harder than it needs to be. Have I ever thrown in the towel on coaching someone? Yeah, absolutely. It's never something I want to do, but I'm just in a different position than most people at this point. I've done this for so long that I don't need to coach people. I kind of just do it because I need something to do and I like it. So if someone's not making that fun or they're not taking it seriously and they're wasting my time and wasting their time, like I'll just tell them, that they're doing that. Usually they'll turn around. Usually they'll be like, yeah, you're right. And I needed to hear that more often than getting mad. But people do get mad too once in a while. It's pretty rare. I don't train that many people. I only work with 40 people personally myself. And usually those people work with me for like 6 months to a year. So I don't really get that many new people because of that. But the coaches, we have the coaches that take on new people all the time. And you'll have those people who they say they want to do it. And then as soon as they realize what it takes, they just don't have it. And you just are like, hey, like come back when you're ready. It's not an insulting thing. I'm not ready to do a contest prep right now. So I'm not going to say that I'm, tougher than them or anything like that. I wouldn't want to do a contest prep right now. I'm not in the mindset of doing a contest prep right now. And if you're not there, then you just got to be honest with yourself. And yeah, sometimes you'll just tell the client, hey, come, come back when you're ready. So, but it's better to be honest with the client, because they're going to find out eventually. That's the one thing I think is great. I think you have to do as a coach, you have to be honest with the client because the client is going to find out eventually, whether they find out they're not going to be ready for the show because they're not doing everything they need to do, or maybe their body just wasn't responding the way it needed to. And you're telling them, hey, you're not going to be ready for this show. I need to pull you off this show. They're going to find out either then and they're going to be mad that they're not ready or whatever, or they're going to be mad when they get off stage or when they get on stage and they realize they're the least in shape person there. So you have to be honest with the clients and tell them those things because otherwise you're doing them a big disservice. No one wants to be the least in shape person at a fitness competition. So if you're a coach and your client's not ready, it's better to just tell them because they're going to leave you and be mad after the show if you don't versus you being honest up front if you're not ready. So do people quit their transformations too? Yep. People quit transformations all the time. It's hard to do. People will have great intentions when they first start everything off, but sometimes people just aren't ready for it. You have to be in the right mindset for it. Coach is never going to do that for you. Coach is never going to be the person, your external source of motivation. That has to come from within. You doing your check-in weekly to your coach once a week It's not going to be like this motivating, uplifting thing where you're like, oh yeah, now I can do it for the week. Now I can stick to my diet for the next 7 days. That has to come from within. It's going to be very temporary, your external sources of motivation. Not saying it's not helpful, but it's not going to get you through what it takes to get all the way there. And people just need to be ready for it. It might take a few times for them to really get their mind behind it. So that's just the reality of this. It's not easy. No matter what you're doing, it's not, even if you're just trying to lose 10 pounds, it's not easy. Do you think national shows should be the only open first place, receive pro status like North Americans? I don't know. I don't know about that. That's hard to say because some girls who get second do really well on the pro level. And yeah, it's hard to say, honestly, because we need pros to do these shows. So some shows, let's say we get to there was a shows a few years ago that were up to like 50 people, right, in a regular show. And at that state, when it was like that, and there was like 50 people, 45 people in these pro shows, I thought, yeah, maybe we're putting out too many pros. But then you'll get some shows that only have like 10 pros and 8 pros. And then you have someone, who beats 5 people and they get to the Olympia, and those 5 people are, kind of not really that great. And this girl gets to the Olympia, not that big of an accomplishment. And I don't think should be going to that prestige of a show if she beat rookies that weren't really that good. And maybe, they're competing early when they should. So, I would rather have to go through harder people, maybe have more pros than, so it's a double-edged sword, right? Because you have some shows that have 50 people and then it's hard for someone to even get noticed. And you have some shows that are only 6 and a girl got to the Olympia who probably shouldn't have been at the Olympia, gets dead last at the Olympia, right? So it's hard to say. It's difficult to balance. I think right now the way it's set up, I think it is going pretty good because we're getting about 25 people in pro shows. And I think that's a good number to make sure no one slips through that shouldn't have got to the Olympia. And it's not too many. It's not at that 50 mark. But once it gets to like 50 at every show, I think, yeah, put it to 1 only. Advice for hard gainers below average growth. 1, check your hormones first. So make sure you're getting your hormones tested. Make sure that you have all of your levels where they need to be. And if not, maybe consider optimization. 2, make sure that your workouts are hard enough. Be honest with yourself and tell yourself, say, hey, am I really working hard enough to build muscle the way I want to build muscle? Am I really giving it my all? Because, like right now, like me personally, I work out. Right now I'm working out 5 days per week. I'm doing boxing 4 to 5 days a week too. When I'm in the gym, I'm not actually working out as hard as I would need to build muscle, but I'm putting more of my energy towards that. So I can't lie to myself and be like, why am I not building muscle? Right. So if you're doing everything that you need to do and you're actually giving it your all in the gym and you're still not building muscle and you're eating everything right, you're eating all the proteins, you're not like missing days of all that, check your hormones, make sure, and then reassess your programming. Maybe you need to adjust your workout program too. But more likely than not, it's going to be food intake, consistency of that food intake, intensity in the gym, and then check your hormones to make sure that they are in a state where it would even allow you to build muscle. If you have like 0 testosterone and you're giving yourself really hard workouts and then you're missing 1 day a week of hitting your nutrition on point, then yeah, you're probably not going to build muscle. It's going to be very, very little. All right, guys, I think that is it. You can ask me questions through DM. I will do another, I'll do more of these videos. I'll do one next week too, like this, if I don't do any interviews. But yeah, keep those questions coming in because that's how this one got started. All right, here's another last one. All right, Regs17. Sam is great. Thanks for having a great team. Feeling good coming off a show. On to the next one. Yeah, Sam is great. I think Sam's been with me now for 7 or 6 years, something like that. It's crazy. Like some of the coaches have been with me like 8 years. Like she's like the second. I think she's like 7. So yeah, we find the good ones. We hang on to them. I hang on to them I'm just sitting there like a guy who got broken up with that won't accept it. I'm just like, no, stay here. we try not to lose our coaches, which I find the good ones. So anyway, that is it, guys. I will talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you later.